If I told you that almost every nation on Earth, rich, poor, powerful, or struggling, is drowning in debt at the exact same time, you might shake your head and ask the question that seems impossible to answer. If every country is in debt, who is the creditor? Because someone has to be owed this money, right? Yet when you look at the actual numbers, the reality becomes more mysterious. The United States owes over $34 trillion. Japan owes more than twice its GDP. China's hidden local debts could exceed $12 trillion. Europe is buried under layers of public and private borrowing. Developing countries owe billions they can't pay. On paper, it looks like the entire planet has borrowed money from some invisible giant. But the true story is far stranger and far more fascinating than anyone imagines. To understand it, we must go back to the early 20th century when modern governments realized something revolutionary. They could raise money without raising taxes, simply by selling IOUs to their own citizens. These IOUs became government bonds, a financial tool so powerful that it would redefine global economics forever. During World War I and World War II, governments begged citizens to buy war bonds, not just out of patriotism, but because countries needed vast amounts of money and had no other safe way to get it. People bought bonds. Governments paid interest. And a huge part of national debt became money owed to ordinary citizens. Fast forward to today. When you hear that a country is in debt, much of that debt is simply money owed to its own people: workers, retirees, pensioners, teachers, doctors, factory workers, anyone who invests in government bonds through savings accounts, pension funds, insurance companies, or retirement plans. This alone explains a huge part of global debt. But the next layer is even stranger. Governments owe money to themselves. Central banks like the U.S. Federal Reserve, the Bank of Japan, and the European Central Bank buy their own government's bonds to keep interest rates low and stabilize the economy. In Japan, the central bank now holds more than 40% of all government debt. Imagine owing money to yourself and then paying interest back to yourself. That's the system. And most people don't even realize it. But this still doesn't reveal the whole truth. Because countries also lend to each other. The U.S. owes money to Japan. Japan owes money to the U.S. China holds U.S. debt. The U.S. holds European debt. Oil-producing nations hold American bonds. European nations buy each other's bonds. It's the world's strangest circle. Governments lending money to other governments that are also in debt. But it gets even deeper. The largest creditor in the world isn't a country at all. It's the global financial market. Pension funds, insurance companies, hedge funds, sovereign wealth funds, index funds, banks, corporations, billionaires, ordinary savers. All of them hold government bonds because bonds are the bedrock of stability. The world's biggest creditor is millions of people you'll never meet: retirees, teachers, nurses, workers, investors, ordinary humans buying government IOUs to protect their savings. Your retirement? Stored in government debt. Your bank deposits? Often invested in government debt. Your insurance premiums? Parked partly in government debt. Behind every trillion of national debt, there is a network of global savers quietly financing governments. And then comes the most misunderstood institution of all, the International Monetary Fund, a global financial safety net. But here's the twist. The IMF itself is funded by the same countries that borrow from it. When Argentina borrows, that money partly comes from contributions made by the US, Europe, China, and more than 180 members. The world funds the IMF. The IMF funds the world. Another loop. By now you begin to see the truth. The global debt system is not a straight line. It's a circle. Every country owes money. Every country is also a creditor. Money flows from governments to citizens, from citizens to banks, from banks to markets, from markets to foreign governments, from foreign governments to institutions, and right back into national treasuries. This system works because the world trusts government bonds, especially U.S. bonds. The U.S. dollar is the backbone of global trade, so countries store their wealth in American debt. That's why the U.S. can borrow trillions without collapsing. Investors trust the system. But the story gets darker. Because while wealthy countries borrow to fund growth, poor countries borrow to survive. African nations, Latin America, South Asia. Many are trapped in a cycle where they borrow from richer nations and institutions just to pay off previous loans. This creates a dangerous imbalance. Rich countries borrow cheaply, poor countries borrow expensively. And when crises hit, like in Greece in 2012, Argentina in 2001, Sri Lanka in 2022, governments can't pay their debts, and the entire global financial system trembles. The modern world is built on debt. Debt is how governments build roads, schools, hospitals, militaries, power grids, airports, and social programs. Debt is how economies grow. Debt is how financial markets function. And most importantly, debt is how money itself is created. When banks issue loans, new money enters the economy. When governments issue bonds, financial markets expand. Debt isn't a flaw in the system, it is the system. Which brings us back to the question, if every country is in debt, who is the creditor? The answer is not a single nation, not a secret group, not a hidden power. The answer is the world itself. Countries owe money to their citizens. Citizens owe money to banks. Banks owe money to markets. Markets owe money to governments. Governments owe money to foreign investors. Foreign investors owe money to institutions. And institutions owe money back to countries. The world owes money to the world. This circular relationship is the invisible engine that keeps the global economy alive. But it also carries a silent danger. If trust breaks, if investors stop buying bonds, if central banks lose control, if countries default, the entire system can freeze. It almost happened in 2008, when global markets collapsed. It nearly happened again in 2020, when COVID shut down the world. And it could happen again if nations borrow too aggressively or if interest rates rise too quickly. Yet for now, the system holds, because every creditor is also a debtor, and every debtor is also a creditor. The world has created the most complex financial web in human history, one that binds every country into the same fate. No nation stands alone. No economy stays isolated. And no country borrows without indirectly lending in return. That is the hidden truth behind the question billions of people never think to ask. If every country is in debt, who is the creditor? The creditor is all of us, every saver, every investor, every pensioner, every bank, every institution, every government. The world owes money to the world, and the entire system depends on one fragile thing: trust.